Hello guys, today I want to teach you how to query the last relationship row, the latest record of has many relationship. So for example, you have transactions, every transaction belongs to a category, and you want to list the categories with the latest transaction for each category. And there are 5 ways to do that. Historically, there were different articles and tutorials with subqueries, with relationships, and I will show you all of that. And quite recently, Laravel released a new feature specifically for the latest row, and I will show you that as well at the end of the video as probably the best way to do that. So step by step, let's start with the wrong way and we'll make it better and better. The most straightforward way, but probably the worst one in terms of performance, is to take care of the relationship in the blade. So you query all the categories, which is like parent record, and each category has many transactions, which is cool. So in the controller, we don't do any subqueries or anything. And then in the blade, while viewing those categories, we do category, load the transactions, take the latest first. That latest is the same as order by created at descending. We take the first record and we show the amount of that transaction. And the result is this page. So 10 categories, latest transaction with the amount, which is cool. But the problem with that, and down below I've installed Laravel debug bar, we have 14 queries to the database. Some of them are generally about the users of my system, which is not relevant, but here it is. 1 query for categories. And then for each of the category, we have 1 query to the database with category ID 1, category ID 2, and others. And this is called N+1 query problem. And I have a separate video on how to solve that in latest Laravel versions, by the way. So I will link that in the description below. But basically, we have 1 extra query for each of the categories. And if we list 100 categories here, we have 100 queries to the database, which is wrong. So how to fix that? Usually people fix that with so-called eager loading. And this is where we get to the second way of doing the same thing. So instead of doing that in Blade, we load the transactions here with transactions. And then in the Blade, we don't need to query the transactions relationship. Instead of latest, here we have a collection now, and latest wouldn't work because latest is the Eloquent query builder function. Here we need to sort by descending by ID, for example, or created at, however you want. And then we would get fewer queries to the database, but it will have another downside. Look at the models. Here we have 10 transactions and 10 categories loaded from the database. So 1 for each category. If we refresh now, we have only 5 queries to the database, which is exactly what we wanted. So fewer queries, faster performance. But in here then, for each of the category, we load all the transactions of that category because we specified categories with all transactions. And if one category has 1,000 of transactions, it will be loaded here, which means the assumptions of RAM memory on the server. Which basically means you improve the performance in one place, but decrease the performance in other place. Is there a better way? There is. Third way of doing the same operation is if you need exactly 1 field here. So you don't need all the transaction with all the details, but you need 1 field, and for that you may write subquery. So we don't load all the transactions here. We do add select of, let's call the field latest transaction amount, and the result of that select would be transaction model select amount. Then we do, for example, like this, where column, and the column from transactions will be category ID and categories ID. So basically we're doing the join here, categories ID. Then we do latest here and take 1. And now this becomes a variable of the final collection. So in the blade, we don't need any of that. All we need to do is category latest transaction amount. Let's refresh the page. And here's the result. 61 models only, so it's even less than it was previously. And it's all in 1 query. So select categories, and then there's a subquery for the amount, for exactly the field that we need. So in this case, it makes sense, as I said, if you query 1 specific field from the latest relationship, then subquery is your friend. But what if you do need the full record, and I've reverted that back, you need the full record of transaction for whatever reason? Is there a better way still within that condition? Yes, there is. So instead of doing transactions, you could create a special relationship, public function latest transaction, which would return this has one, not has many, has one of transaction class latest, like this. So it would return the latest row, and let's see how it works. We will use latest transaction here with latest transaction, and then in the categories we don't need to sort here anymore. We have latest transaction amount. Let's see how that works. And here's the result. So we have 5 queries, which is good, but still it doesn't really solve the problem of many transactions because it still loads all the transactions. Although it has one, and you would think it loads only one, and you can find tutorials online that suggest to do has one, but in reality it saves the query problem, but it doesn't save the model problem and memory problem. Is there a better way? In the latest Laravel versions, there is a new, better way. In Laravel 8.42, there was a new pull request submitted by Leonard, which adds a relationship of many or one of many. You can refer that in the documentation, for example, you can find it. And how that works, it's basically the same thing as latest transaction, but instead of latest, you do latest of many. So it's a slight change, but it would be totally different SQL query, and let me show you. So look at that old query currently, select from transactions where category ID is basically a simple where statement. We refresh and we have 5 queries, but much fewer models because we load only the ones that we need to load. And the query is like this. Select from transactions, then there's a subquery. Select max ID from transaction group by category ID, and then joining this transactions to latest transaction subtable, and then we have one row for each category. You may pause this video now and study that query a bit more deeper, but basically one of many is the new way how you can load the latest record, the latest relationship record, which I recommend. Again, it was released in Laravel 8.42, so before that you should use one of those ways I discussed previously. Of course, not the first one with n+1 query problem, but one of those second, third, or fourth. But I do recommend that you keep upgrading to the latest Laravel version just because they release something like that every minor version, although Laravel is not at Laravel 9 yet, but still every week or every few weeks there's something interesting released. And also follow Laravel News for that, and follow my YouTube channel here as well, so subscribe for the news. Also, you can subscribe to my email newsletter, which I send every Thursday with Laravel links, news, articles, tutorials, links to my YouTube videos if you missed anything throughout that week. So join more than 5,000 subscribers to keep yourself in the loop of Laravel news, and see you guys in other videos.